Now, the 3 Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
Hey, welcome on in. Jim is not here, but Chad Benson is, host of the Chad Benson Show on the Radio American Network. Jim, I assume, he was supposed to be off anyway because it's Columbus Day. For some reason here at the 3 Martini Lunch, the guy named Corombos has to work on Columbus Day, but the guy named Garrity doesn't. But the Jets finally won yesterday, so I know he's really happy about that. So he might not have been in much condition to be on the podcast today anyway. So, Chad, how are you? Happy Columbus Day.
I am great. I'm doing better than Dallas Cowboys, I'll tell you that.
Yes. 3 consecutive losses. That's child's play here in Washington. But
It is. But you got a victory yesterday.
Yes.
You got a victory against the Fish.
That's true. I am not a Skins fan, but they squeaked one out against the winless Dolphins in what folks were calling the Tank Bowl. For who was going to
I was laughing because I thought to myself, they could kick an extra point, it could go to overtime, and a 17-17 tie would be about exactly what I think that thing should have been.
The fact that anyone paid to watch that game is just a testament to the addiction people have to the NFL. But anyway, I hope Jim's enjoying his day off. Great to have you here, Chad. And let's dig in. We actually have good, bad, and crazy today. Last week we had a ton of bad and a ton of crazy, but we're at least starting the week on the conventional format. And the good news for the right is mainly that their best argument for 2020, or at least one of their best arguments, is to just let the Democrats keep talking. We had, what was it, Beto the other night at the Equality Town Hall on CNN talking about taking away everybody's tax-exempt status, and everybody's trying to get the most extreme that they can be on a lot of different issues, and that's why Joe Biden is kind of seen as a moderate in this race, because everybody else is lurching left, and Bernie Sanders isn't about to share that lurching leftward space. He was talking to Jonathan Karl of ABC News over the weekend, and Karl brought up the point of, hey, you know, you're kind of behind Elizabeth Warren now. She's younger than you. She didn't just have a heart attack, and you're pretty much ideologically the same. And the only thing Bernie could disagree with was the last part, and he did. Here's a couple of clips, first of all, mashed together on that about how he and Elizabeth Warren are not the same.
But there are differences between Elizabeth and myself. Elizabeth, I think, as you know, has said that she is a capitalist through her bones. I'm not. And the reason I am not is because I will not tolerate for 1 second the kind of greed and corruption and income and wealth inequality and so much suffering that is going on in this country today, which is unnecessary.
And then he offered this little tidbit almost as an aside, Chad.
And I think business as usual and doing it the old-fashioned way is not good enough. It's not regulation now. What we need is, in fact, I don't want to get people too nervous, we need a political revolution.
Does it feel better if he says it matter-of-factly than if he's screaming at the podium like he normally is in the debate? Bernie's also out with a couple of ideas to end corporate greed, like giving workers 20% of shares in the companies they work for and 45% of the seats on the corporate boards. He'd jack up the corporate tax rate back to 35%, and there's a whole lot more that he's planning to do to end corporate greed and the rich getting richer and so forth. So, Chad, am I right about that, that the Republicans and Trump's best argument is just to play clips of Democrats talking?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. You know what? Look, we're not going to be a socialist nation. We already have some socialist programs. Let's be real here for a second. And Bernie, the heart attack alone will have destroyed a good portion of Bernie's campaign. And the reason he's coming out and attacking her right now is because the fact is she is a capitalist. But I always laugh about this, right, because whenever I hear them talk about corporate greed, what makes me laugh is the fact that you will find nobody greedier than people like Bernie Sanders who want all of your money to do all of their programs because it's always about other people's money. Greed is fine as long as it's done by government, apparently. Greed is not fine if it's done by the average individual who's busting their butt trying to do something with themselves and make as much as they possibly can for themselves and their family.
Yeah, that's insane. But the smart response here, at least if you want to be a good general election candidate, if you're Warren or Biden or anybody else, is saying, well, yeah, I'm not out there. Of course, I'm a capitalist. That's what our economy is anchored in here, free markets. I know we need more regulation. That would be the Democratic perspective. But that's probably not what's going to happen. She's going to be like, oh, I want a revolution too, just a little bit different one. What do you think?
Yeah, well, she's going to try that level. And see, Bernie's upset, too, because for the last election, he had a lane all to himself. Now he looks over and he's in a traffic jam because everybody's gotten into his lane because you have to placate this 15% of uber progressives and be uber woke and talk about the most incredible nonsense in the world The fact is, though, you go back and look at Elizabeth Warren, she is a capitalist. She's been that way. And we all know when you run usually extremely right and extremely left. And then when it comes to the general, you try to move somewhere in the middle. I don't think we're going to get that this time. But the truth is I just continue to tell everybody, let everybody talk. And in politics, doesn't matter what side of the aisle it is. As long as you're talking, there's a good chance you're talking your way out of something rather than into something anymore. And that's the sad part of things is we just have to stand back and go, wow, look at them. Look at what the insanity of what he would like to do to corporations and this country. I'm all for fairness. I think we should have an opportunity to look at certain things in a different way. I got no problem with that. My issue is where Bernie would like to take us. As much as he screams about Scandinavia, they'll tell you all the time, we're a free market society with some high taxes. We're not a socialist country.
Is this why Biden, even though he has a hard time stringing a sentence together, and Elizabeth Warren, although she's keeping her powder dry in these debates, are the ones who are soaring to the front of the pack here because they're not lighting their hair on fire every 10 minutes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's just it. Bernie talks about it. He wants a revolution. Whenever I hear revolution, I go and look at the places that have had revolutions. You know what I find after the revolution is died down and somebody else is taking control? It's ugly, it's nasty, and it's usually oppressive. Look, if you want to change things, that's fine. I get that. I understand. I look at the way that things have gone, and I understand that there are people out there who are looking around for government to be their God, and they want that. But what happens is the people that always want to lead the revolution never want to live underneath the thing they've created. They always want to live above it. And it goes back to the fact that they're as greedy as anybody else in this world.
And the fact that their promises don't come true just means they need more of your money and more of your freedom. And then if you just give it to them, then everything will be just fine.
Other people's money, man. Other people's money.
All right, let's move to the Bad Martini here, Chad. And I'm sure last week, just like we did on your program, you were talking quite a bit about China and the NBA and all the different aspects of the crackdown on the Houston Rockets general manager and nobody wanting to talk about it. And then Steve Kerr saying pretty much a moral equivocation between China and President Trump in some ways. But now President Xi is trying to take the mantle back. He doesn't want moral equivalence. He wants to make it very clear where he stands on this. Apparently he was interviewed about Hong Kong, and he said anyone attempting to split China in any part of the country will end in crushed bodies and shattered bones. This is according to the South China Morning Post, which quoted state media. He was meeting with the Nepali prime minister at the time. And he also said, and any external forces backing such attempts at dividing China will be deemed by the Chinese people as pipe dreaming. I'm not sure if that means the same thing in China as it does here, because it sounds more ominous than just wishing for something that you don't think is ever going to happen. So, Chad, I mean, Trump's been pretty tough on his opponents. I don't think he's ever used the term crushed bodies and shattered bones. But in China, it's not just rhetoric. It actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens. And, Xi, I was talking to Gordon Chang last week, and they talk about Xi in a way where his idol is Chairman Mao. Xi is taking it in a much different position. He wants all of the good stuff that capitalism and money brings so he can fund all the things that he believes the Communist Party should be doing. And I look at them and I'm telling everybody they have a 100-year plan. We do not have a 100-year plan. There's a place that China is trying to go. And this is one of the, I have my issues at times with Trump, and I think you should never fall in love with the politician, always fall in like. But the one thing that I have stayed steady on is the way that he's trying to deal with China is real. And I wish more countries around the globe would look up and realize you might like their cheap goods, you might like their cheap labor, but the reality is they're using our money to grow and get their power. And what do you think they're going to do when they continue to grow and become this giant, huge monster? They're ready to take on the world. And that's what they're doing right now.
Absolutely. They're economically blackmailing companies and countries. They're stealing intellectual property, forced technology transfers, currency manipulation. It's a whole mess. And, of course, we're focused on 4-year election cycles, sometimes 2-year election cycles. Sometimes it's just the Kardashians. We're going to have a hard time matching the dedication to a 100-year plan. And I'm not even sure we particularly need a 100-year plan because we have so many different political changes over the span of a century. But what do we need to be doing besides the trade battle that Trump's up to here?
Well, first and foremost, we have to realize that it's either going to be our way or the Chinese way going forward. And that's not just us. That is the West. That is freedom. Our way or the Chinese. And I think the rest of the West and the rest of the free world needs to realize that we need to be together on this. We need to be going in the same direction. And it can't just be us alone, because the fact is as I look around, I'm thinking, we're taking everything on, and everybody is going to enjoy the fruits of whatever it is that comes out of it, especially when we come out the other side victorious. But we need everybody else to get on the same board, because every little thing that we do to basically get away from their power, to stop funding them, is going to make all of us stronger. And so that's why if I'm Trump, I'm out there banging the drum, saying, talking to the World Trade Organization, talking to every single company out there globally. Hey, it's time to think about moving to India, trying to find places in Africa that aren't full of strife and war, and at any moment have a regime change, and trying to build stuff up so we can take away our money from their plan.
Let's talk about attention span just in one more context here, not just the 100-year plan in China, but in our own country, because a lot of people, left, right, and middle, I mean, it's not often you get political partisans to agree on much of anything these days, but there was a pretty unified blowback against the NBA following the original offense, quote unquote, from the Houston Rockets general manager. And now, of course, you've got people protesting at NBA preseason games. But with the fruit fly attention span of a lot of folks in the United States, is this going to blow over the first time LeBron's got a sweet dunk in one of the early season games, or is this going to last a while?
Well, no, I think this may last a bit, and I think what you have here too is also you have a lot of ways. You have two separate audiences, and that's the funny thing is you got a younger generation that's looking at the NBA, and they're not really concerned with it, and you have an older generation who Steve Kerr really went after about, well, the NBA, it's basically all about patriotic and this, that, and the other. And it's a very interesting thing the way that, because NBA and basketball itself is a global game. The NFL is not really a global game. And that's the thing I think that it differs this. But, we do have a short attention span. And while politicians and outspoken, opinion people and many others have gone, business people have went after the NBA, the fact is that the younger generation really doesn't quite get it. And I don't think they really care.
All right, on to the Crazy Martini now, Chad. And we go to President Trump and the media and a video that doesn't technically involve either one of them, but a group called American Priorities having, I don't know if it's an annual meeting, but certainly a major conference at a Trump property at Doral down in Florida. And they showed this kind of video meme, which essentially takes a scene out of an old movie. The shooter,
a great movie, by the way.
The shooter,
great movie, The Kingsman.
Yes, The Kingsman. The shooter becomes Trump, and then, of course, his political critics and the media are the victims here. CBS News, among many others, talking about this, spending a lot of time talking about it. This is Anne-Marie Green and their White House correspondent on CBS News over the weekend talking about this without showing it.
CBS has decided not to show that video. CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy has more on the backlash surrounding the video. So I think because we're sort of not showing the video, Ben, we should kind of tell people a little bit about it, because it's kind of like almost sort of a meme where the president's face is superimposed on a body as well as the faces of Democrats and then the logos of media outlets.
Exactly, and I'm glad we're not showing it because this video is really gruesome and pretty horrific. So this appears to be a scene from a movie called The Kingsman, and in this movie scene, this person goes into a church and basically kind of open fires on the people inside this church. In this particular use of it, the president's face is superimposed on the body of this shooter. They refer to it as the Church of Fake News, and so the parishioners in the church are these people who have their faces are the logos of various media outlets. So you see Politico, you see CBS, you see CNN. And then there's also some of the president's political rivals, Mitt Romney, John McCain, people like this that the president attacks. And you see President Trump basically shooting people. You see him stabbing people. It's horrible stuff.
So, Chad, obviously, you get the typical arguments here. One, of course, is that Trump's denigration of his political opponents in the media inspires people to do this, and ultimately it's going to lead to actual violence and certainly coarsens the culture. Others would point out that Trump had nothing to do with this. It's not really him. It's just people who happen to rent his property. What do you think about all this?
Well, Trump came out, I guess, in the White House, strongly condemned it. They haven't seen it, they said, which I'm not quite sure. Trump probably laughed at it. But you know what? There's a lot of these organizations out there that do some of these things. And, you know, a couple, was it last year or whatever, they had that one where it was like some sort of, you know, dancing Trump on, like, I don't know, with some sort of Persian where he was marching through and he was high-fiving everybody, same kind of thing. I didn't have a problem with this. This was a bit much. I got to be honest with you. I think this is another one of those situations where a group, they get people rabble-razzled. They want to get people excited. And emotion is what you use. You don't use facts. You don't use logic. To get people to act, to get people to cheer, you use emotion, and you throw the craziest thing out there that you possibly can. And unfortunately, in this day and age where I think we've become so desensitized to everything, it takes things like this for people to go, oh, my goodness. He said he didn't know about it. It was shown in a side room. And again, this wasn't anything sanctioned by him, but it has once again gone viral. And Trump is the one who's getting hammered for it. And there's a lot of things you could yell at Trump for. This ain't one of them.
How does he respond to this? I mean, because the argument's going to be, no, he didn't have anything to do with it, but he's the one who inspired it. So is there blame to go around for blowing this out of proportion? Is there just blame to go around for whoever put this together in bad taste in the first place? How do you see it?
Yeah, you know what? It's whoever put this together in bad taste is the person you should be looking at. The reality is, though, Trump has, you know, he's called the media the enemy of the people. I don't think the media is the enemy of the people. I think some of the media has some Trump derangement syndrome, and I think some of the media also has, wants to protect Trump at all costs. The reality is this is the world that we live in now. And if you think this is bad, wait till the deep fakes start to get very real, and then you're going to find out how crazy this is going to become. But this right here is overblown, and once again, it's an opportunity to talk about something ad nauseum because why? Because it's Trump. And because of that, we could talk at it for hours and hours, and it gives us something that's interesting to talk about. And Trump is business. He's big business, and he will always be big business while he remains in the spotlight, especially in politics.
Exactly right. And if you circle back to our first topic and the Democrats in 2020, this might be one cycle where the ideas don't actually end up mattering so much because it's such a clash of personalities. It was mostly that way in 2016, too. And looks like 2020 is not going to be much different.
Nope, it's not going to be different at all. And we vote for the people sometimes when we can't figure out what we want for the people we like. Now we're not even at that point. We're voting against more people than we're voting for people, and that's sad. But, yeah, there's a clash of personalities between somebody who's Trump, who's a tough-talking New Yorker, who says what he thinks, and sometimes the filter needs to be there, but it's not there, and he doesn't care. And on the other side, you've got people that have to decide to themselves when they're thinking, how do I not offend anybody, and at the same time make sure that I could placate everybody? It's going to be insane to watch the way this thing plays out here in the coming weeks and months.
Chad, you have made 3 martini lunch history today. You're the first person ever to sub for both Jim and me at different times. So your versatility knows no bounds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Chad Benson, host of the Chad Benson Show. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thank you for being with us today. We greatly appreciate that. Jim Garrity will be back on Tuesday. In the meantime, subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you haven't already, and also leave us a nice little review over at iTunes with as many stars as possible. That always helps us out as well. Tune in Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.